She did not hear the door close behind her. She only felt the draught, cold and sudden, like a hand pressing against her chest. 70 years of living in that village, 70 years of knowing every stone on every path, every voice before it finished its first word. And now she stood outside, her white cane trembling against the cracked earth, her small bundle of belongings tied in a cloth so old it had forgotten its own colour. No one said goodbye. No one needed to. The silence said everything a village can say when it has decided a person is finished. Her name was Maryam, and she had become, in the eyes of the people who once brought their children to her door for stories and remedies, a burden that the earth itself could no longer carry. It had started slowly, the way most cruelties do. First, it was the neighbours who stopped greeting her in the mornings. Then it was the baker who no longer set aside the bread she always bought on Sundays. Then her nephew, the one she had raised after his mother died, the one she had fed from her own plate through 3 hard winters, came one evening and sat across from her without looking at her face and told her that his wife needed the room, that the children were getting older, that it was time. He left a small amount of money on the table, folded inside a piece of paper, as if the paper itself was ashamed of what it carried. She did not weep that night. A woman who has lived long enough knows that weeping is for those who still believe things might change by morning. Instead, she sat with her hands in her lap, fingers loose, and listened to the house breathe its last familiar breath around her. She memorized the sound of the window latch, the particular creak of the wooden floor near the door, the way the wind came through the eastern wall in a whisper that had always felt, to her, like someone saying her name. By the time the village finished discussing her situation, over tea, over evening meals, with the comfortable certainty of people who have never had to stand outside their own life and look in, the decision had already been made without anyone admitting they made it. She was blind. She was old. She had no sons. These 3 facts, laid side by side, had become a verdict. She walked. There is no other word for it. She walked with her cane along the road that led away from everything she had ever known, and the sun was heavy and indifferent above her, and the dust rose around her ankles like something grieving. She walked until she couldn't. She sat at the edge of a broken wall near a path she did not recognize, and she waited. Not for rescue, not for a miracle. She simply waited, the way old trees wait, without hope or despair, only presence. It was a young man named Yusuf who found her. He was not a man the village spoke well of. He had no land, no trade of any stability, a house that leaned slightly to one side, as if it too was tired of standing. He had failed at several things, quietly and without drama, and he carried that failure in the set of his shoulders like a stone no one else could see. He was coming back from a day of work that had paid him almost nothing, and he was hungry, and his shoes had a hole in the left sole that let the heat of the road in with every step. He saw her sitting against the broken wall and he stopped. He did not ask many questions. He asked only if she was alone, and she said yes, and something in the way she said it, not with self-pity but with the plain honesty of a woman who has stopped pretending, made him stand very still for a moment. Then he picked up her bundle, he offered his arm, and he walked her to his house. The house was small enough that you could hear everything in it from anywhere inside it. The walls had cracks that let in threads of moonlight. The single bed had a frame that groaned like an old man when weight was placed on it. Yusuf gave her the bed and slept on the floor on a mat that smelled of dust and old wool. He did not tell anyone in the village. He did not want praise. He was not even certain those first nights that he had done anything extraordinary. He had simply seen a person who needed a roof, and he had a roof, and so the equation seemed simple. But nothing is simple for long. The village talked. Villages always talk. Some said he was foolish. Some said he was after something, her money, her land, some inheritance no one could quite identify. Some said the blind bring bad luck into a house, and that his life, already fragile, would collapse entirely under the weight of her presence. A few people warned him directly, standing at his door with the authority of those who have always made their cruelty sound like concern. He listened. He did not argue. He closed the door. Inside, something was happening that no one outside could measure. Maryam, who had not spoken more than necessary in years, who had learned to make herself small, to need less, to ask for nothing, began, slowly, to speak again. Not loudly, not with the performance of someone who has been freed, but quietly, in the evenings, when Yusuf came home and lit the small lamp and they shared whatever he had brought, she would say things, small things, a memory, an observation, the name of a plant that grew near the road and what it was good for, the way weather could be predicted by the ache in old knees. He listened. He was not educated. He had no great wisdom of his own to offer. But he had the rarest of gifts. He knew how to be still while another person spoke. And in that stillness, something in Maryam that had begun to harden quietly softened. He did not become rich. The house did not stop leaning. His shoes remained broken, and the winter that came that year was long and indifferent. There were mornings when they had very little, and they sat together in the cold, with their hands around cups of weak tea, not speaking, only existing side by side in the particular piece of people who have nothing left to pretend about. The village eventually forgot about them, the way villages forget about anything that refuses to become a scandal or a spectacle. And in that forgetting, in that silence, the two of them built something without ever naming it. A life made of small dignities, of soup shared without ceremony, of a blind woman's hand sometimes resting on a young man's arm as he guided her to the door. She died on a quiet morning, near the end of a winter that had finally begun to release its hold. She died in the bed he had given her, with her hands folded and her face calm, and outside the window the first birds of approaching spring were beginning, tentatively, to sing. He sat beside her for a long time before he told anyone. He was not weeping. He was simply sitting with the weight of everything that had passed between them. The weight of her stories, her silences, her trust. The way she had once told him, without sentiment, that he had given her back the feeling of being a person rather than a problem. He buried her himself, in the small plot behind the house, beneath a tree she had told him she always liked the sound of when the wind moved through its leaves. And then he went inside, and he made tea, and he sat alone in a house that was quieter than it had ever been, and yet somehow, impossibly, unjustly, mercifully, less empty than it had ever felt before.